the person on a canvas, and he gave us ideas, but basically he let us free rein and make different color versions, and we presented them to him, and some he liked and some he didn't like. He was always very vague with his instructions. I know from the dealer where he bought all the paint, he just would call in, I need yellow, green, and red. And he said, there's so many yellows, there's so many reds, so many greens. It was not important for him that a certain color was at a certain spot. He didn't care.
From the mid-'70s until just a few years before Warhol died, Horst was really single-handedly responsible for producing the great bulk of Warhol's prints and his paintings. And he would take them up to Andy and say, you know, you just have to sign them. Everything that he produced was every bit as legitimate and authentic as the works that Warhol eventually wound up signing.
Joe Simon's Warhol self-portrait of 65 has been disqualified in part because it was made off-site. But Warhol himself cared less and less about this. By the mid-'70s, in fact, it became his modus operandi.
This building is the place where all the Andy Warhol art was made. It was a sweatshop. Everything was totally illegal. It was toxic fumes from the solvents, from the inks. It was basically done in a backroom storage area. All the color decisions, you know, the line-ups of the photo and line, we basically all did this. He used us and our sense of color for his purposes. In all those years I was here, he not once came in. I think he knew what a backbreaking, hideous and toxic place it was, and he didn't want to be associated with it. And then he was calling out, quick, 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 do the portraits, hurry up, I don't care if the dots fall off the paintings in 10 years. And then we printed them, and then we had a laundry line there, and we hanging up, turned the heater on in the heat of the summer and cooked them. We literally cooked them up, and then half dry, we went to the subway and brought it up, gave them to Andy, and Andy came out in front and showed the pictures. So creating the impression that he had done them over there.
The wages were lousy, but as ever, Andy was happy to use his own unique currency to help make ends meet. Horst was often given prints. Warhol had always been generous in giving his work to friends and helpers. For his early support and encouragement, Ivan Karp had been given a classic.
During a moment of very intense needfulness, I sold that painting for about $9,000 or $10,000, maybe 15. The painting would be worth between $5 and $10 million now. I sold it to the 17th richest man in the world.
And now he's even richer.
I like to believe he's still. Yeah, now he's richer.
Even Warhol's generosity now presents problems to the Authentication Board as it comes face to face with old friends cashing in their little collections.
He didn't like to pay anyone anything, so he'd give them works of art. I mean, I met Andy's maids who had their problems with their work. But literally every single person.
His maids?
Well, the people who lived with Warhol for 17 years had their works taken away from them, and
so he'd given them gifts, and those were, again, the Authentication Committee refused to authenticate.
Those were unauthenticated, and in some instances they were not returned to them.
I was only one of quite a group of friends who were given, every Christmas would be given a nice little painting. The only problem is I don't dare submit these things to, although they've got Happy Christmas or Happy Birthday, whatever it is from Andy, I don't dare submit these things to the to the foundation, because for fear that I'll be told they're not by Andy.
And that's not all. There's worse to come. To prevent possible legal action, the board also reserves the right to change its opinion about the authenticity of works at any point in the future, as Horst Weber von Behren discovered.
I had one project turned from accepted to not accepted, and I want to know why that is. They don't give you any reason. You want transparency, you want responsibility, and you want accountability.
The de-authentication of a picture would be possible, I suppose, if in the first place you'd explained why you'd authenticated it, or the reverse, if you had rejected it as a Warhol, and now you wanted to reintroduce it into his oeuvre. That's fine, but could you please explain yourself? Could you explain what this process is?
I can only imagine that by bringing these facts to light, some common sense will prevail. I guess, you know, they operate in their own cloistered, you know, secret world, and they get along like that. And I'm sure they don't like people talking about it. I feel sorry for people who have those things in their you know, unauthenticated, whatever, de-authenticated, because they were certainly as authentic as any of the other, whatever you want to call them, objects, silk screens that Andy's name is on. There was no such thing as an authentic Andy Warhol in that sense.
So I wondered, where does this now leave Joe Simon, after 4 long years of chasing the history and provenance of his disputed Warhol self-portrait? When you think about the time you've put into this, I mean, what's it done to your life, to your relationships? Would you say you were obsessed? I'd say you were obsessed.
Slightly, yes, and certainly my friends did, and my family thought so. Wanting to get to the next point, and I was obsessed with getting to that point, so it cost me a 7-year relationship, it cost me a lot of work.
You lost your relationship because you were just so obsessed that you know, you didn't have time for anything else.
Which is exactly right.
Was that a fair comment, do you think?
I think it was.
Back in London, jet-lagged, can't sleep. Find myself wandering by Marks and Spencer's in Notting Hill, the place that used to be Damien Hirst's restaurant, the pharmacy. I was reminded that the entire contents of this place were sold off for the phenomenal price of £11 million. Plates, ashtrays, chairs, and the rest. And some of it was made after the restaurant was closed. So, what is art? Or authorship? Discuss. Hirst is a real Warhol baby. He's in the lineage. But then Andy was a bit of an old master's baby too. Those chaps, they all had teams of assistants. How much of this ceiling in London's Whitehall did Rubens actually paint? Rubens worked a bit like Andy. He could be pretty hands-off too. A team of people painted this in his workshop in Antwerp, and then they shipped the panels over here. And you know, Rubens could never ever be bothered to even come and take a look at it. For him, it was just business as usual. But Andy isn't an old master, even though I suspect the Authentication Board are attempting to turn him into one. It's his original thinking about the making of art that's causing the problems.
The description of an Andy Warhol has to be a new kind of a description. Some works he was much more involved with than other works, but it doesn't mean that the works that he didn't actually touch himself are not by Andy Warhol. It was a very daring and original thing to do, to have someone else make your work of art and not be, you know, not try and cover it up, not worry about it, but just say, that's what I do.
40 years after it was made, the Andy Warhol Art Authentication Board Incorporated has concluded, for the moment, because they can of course change their minds, but Joe's self-portrait doesn't count. It's not a Warhol. To quote his lawyer, Peter Stern, it has decorative value. And that's their conclusion on a significant number of other submissions, despite the fact that nearly all of Andy Warhol's collaborators at the time disagree. Warhol himself was mischievous, contrary and inconsistent.